In the summer of 2014, thousands of workers across New England walked out of their stores and began protesting for 6 straight weeks. But instead of asking for higher wages, better benefits, or safer working conditions, the main goal of this protest was for the employees to show their support for one man, Arthur T. Demoulas, the former president and CEO of the company, with their only demand being bring back RDT. With this protest being the result of a decades-long conflict between the two sides of the Demoulas family, who had founded the Market Basket supermarket chain. Now today, Market Basket is a multi-billion-dollar company, but it all started with one store in Lowell, Massachusetts. It was founded in 1917 by 2 Greek immigrants to the US, Athanasios and Ephrasim Demoulas. Eventually, 2 of their sons, George and Telemachus, who went by the name Mike, bought the business from their parents in the 1950s. They then expanded their parents' shop into a large network of more than a dozen stores across New England, with the 2 brothers splitting ownership of the business 50-50. However, tragedy struck in 1971 when George unexpectedly died due to a sudden heart attack, leaving behind a wife and 4 children. Mike then stepped up as leader of the company and of this growing Greek family, with Mike's son, Arthur T., becoming more involved in the business during this time. Soon, Mike and Arthur became the public faces of the company after George's passing. And in the coming decades, Market Basket rapidly grew from just 14 stores in the 1970s to over 50 stores by the 1990s. With the store gaining a reputation for having low prices and adapting to the needs of the local community. For example, when one store opened up in an area that had a lot of immigrants from Afghanistan, the store made sure to carry local items such as Afghan bread to better cater to the interests of the local community. There's even one notable story of a store going out of their way to stock eggnog all year round, just because one of the neighborhood children was severely handicapped and needed a high-fat drink every day. As Market Basket grew, it became well known for not only being a really good store to shop at, but also to work for. With his reputation being credited to Mike and Arthur T., who were seen as fostering a worker-friendly environment. Market Basket was known for being very accommodating to their employees' personal schedules, such as adjusting hours so parents could pick up children from school, or so teenage workers could attend after-school activities. The company also paid above minimum wage salaries, and even started a profit-sharing program so that employees could be rewarded for the company doing well, with this program eventually holding more than $500 million. In addition to this, Market Basket would also give out bonuses based not on job performance, but on how long the employee had been with the company. This was done in the hopes of encouraging people to not just see their jobs as a temporary thing, but as a potential long-term career, with the company establishing an internal promotion process so that people could work their way up from being a cashier to the director of a store, and maybe even an executive one day. With it becoming so common for people to stay with the company, that some top executives at Market Basket had resumes showing that they had worked there for 40, 50, and sometimes even 60 years. With this employee loyalty becoming so common that it even resulted in there being 2 to 3 generations of the same family working at Market Basket over the decades. At the same time, the company was also perfectly okay with people leaving if they wanted to pursue other careers, with there even being Market Basket scholarships to help workers pay for college. Now, while the company was developing a good relationship with the public, in private, conflicts began to emerge between the George and Mike factions of the family. The George faction accused Mike of buying up their shares over the decades, reducing their ownership of the company to just 8%, while Mike and his family soon owned 92%, allowing them to control the future of the company. This led to a series of lawsuits, allegations of corporate spying, as well as physical fights during the 1990s, with these conflicts resulting in George's family being paid $206 million and being given control of 50.5% of the company. As a result of this, Mike's lawyers allegedly attempted to pressure a law clerk to say that the judge who had ruled on the lawsuits had engaged in misconduct. As a result, when this plan was discovered, it led to an investigation by the FBI, and 2 of the lawyers ended up being stripped of their law licenses, and a third was prevented from practicing law for 3 years. Now, when Mike passed away in 2003, it led there to be 9 main shareholders of the company. This would include Mike's 4 children, Arthur T. and his 3 sisters, and George's 3 children, Arthur S. and his 2 sisters, as well as Rafaela and her daughter, with Rafaela being the widow of Eben Demoulas, a brother of Arthur S., who had tragically passed away in the 1990s. Now, in addition to the shareholders, there's also a 7-member board of directors, with each side of the family being able to pick 2 directors each, and the remaining 3 being independents who were chosen by a majority vote of all 9 shareholders. But just as there are tensions between the George and Mike factions of the family, there are also conflicts between each of the individual shareholders, the most notable of which could be seen in the divide between Arthur S. and Rafaela. And as a result of this, even though she was a member of the George side of the family, she eventually chose to vote with the Mike faction. This then gave the Mike faction majority control of the board, and allowed Arthur T. to have a great deal of influence over the running of the company, with Arthur T. eventually becoming president and CEO by 2008. And even though Arthur T was already well known by the employees, under his leadership, his popularity only continued to increase during this time. For example, the money in the employee profit-sharing program was made up of a series of investments, but as a result of the 2008 financial crisis, the program ended up losing millions of dollars during the stock market crash. In response to this, Arthur T decided to put millions of dollars of company money into the profit-sharing program in order to make up for what was lost and to protect the employees. In addition to this, during this increasingly difficult economic time, now known as the Great Recession, Arthur T decided to give out between $20 to $40 million worth of bonuses in order to help struggling employees and their families. But these actions only led tensions between the two factions to increase, with the George side feeling that Arthur T had gotten too much control over the company and was recklessly spending money in areas that weren't needed, with one allegation being that during his time as president, Arthur T had enriched his side of the family by having Market Basket work with companies and businesses that are close to his wife and his sisters. However, despite these accusations, no wrongdoing was ever found. Then, a few years later, Rafaela ended up switching alliances back to the George faction, shifting control of the company to them. As a result of this, by 2013, there was even talks of removing Arthur T from his position as president and CEO. This resulted in a series of small-scale employee protests, and for the directors of almost all Market Basket stores to come out in support of Arthur T's leadership. The board, now controlled by Arthur S., eventually chose not to remove Arthur T at this time, but did decide to do a one-time payout of $300 million. Which would be divided between the 9 shareholders of the company, with this accounting for about 60% of the cash the company had at the time. And when the news got out, this resulted in the workers coming to see the George faction as being more interested in using company money to enrich themselves, and the Mike faction as fighting for the long-term interests of the employees. And as a result of these corporate conflicts in the following months, the Mike faction brought several lawsuits against the George faction, while Arthur T continued running the company. And as 2013 was still a very difficult economic time, he enacted a new policy of reducing the price of everything in the store by 4% for the entire year, in order to make food more affordable for the customers. But as a result of this policy, the company ended up losing about $170 million that year. Now this was the last straw for the George faction. So on June 23, 2014, Arthur T and 2 other executives were fired from the company. Almost immediately, several top executives quit in protest, and many other employees demanded that Arthur T be brought back. This was followed by a walkout by several hundred office workers, which was followed by warehouse packers, local store employees, and truck drivers. In reaction to this, the remaining leadership of Market Basket fired 8 managers, who they blamed for organizing these pro-Arthur T protests. This, however, only led the protests to grow even larger, as news of these firings spread on Facebook and Twitter. This led several more managers to quit, with hundreds of store employees refusing to come into work, with the remaining employees starting to sabotage the company from the inside, by asking customers to stop buying from the store, ordering random items that weren't needed, and even taping up customer receipts from rival stores, such as Hannaford's, Shaw's, Walmart, and Whole Foods. With several hundred posters with the words, "Arthur T is our CEO," pumping up in the empty aisles of stores, and the crowds of protesters outside. Eventually, some of the local vendors who supplied Market Basket with meat, produce, and other goods joined the protest and refused to make deliveries until Arthur T came back. Now, when the news broke out, many commentators and academics were surprised and found it very hard to believe that these non-unionized workers would risk their careers to support one man, especially since he was the multi-millionaire CEO of the company. This because CEOs are commonly portrayed as being these out-of-touch people who don't really care about everyday workers. But when asked, store employees and protesters provided hundreds of stories about how Arthur T and his father, Mike, would go out of their way to support employees, their families, and the greater community. This was seen through the policies and benefits that they promoted at work, but also through the personal time that both of them spent to develop close relationships with thousands of workers. With Arthur T personally visiting sick and injured employees, attending a wake after the passing of an employee's grandfather, and even offering to cover the cost of medical care when it was needed. And as a result of this, generations of workers and their families felt a strong sense of allegiance to Market Basket, but also a great deal of personal loyalty to Arthur T. And in the coming weeks, the protesters started to have a huge effect on the business. Store shelves were left empty, sales went down by over 90%, and Market Basket had to let go of all of their remaining part-time workers. And soon the towns around these Market Basket stores also began to see their business decline as the lack of customers and continued protests drove people away. This led the governors of New Hampshire and Massachusetts, Maggie Hassan and Deval Patrick, to even begin commenting on the need for there to be a resolution, as the protests were hurting the economy of both states. And then, 6 weeks after the protest began, the two sides of the family finally came to an agreement. The Mike faction would buy out the George faction by purchasing their 55.5% share for $1.6 billion, and Arthur T would return to the company. In the next few days, people began returning to work, and customers returned in large numbers. As a show of gratitude, the new leadership of Market Basket gave out $49 million worth of bonuses that same week. And 10 years after the protest, employees were given another bonus, as well as a personal letter from Arthur T, thanking them for their commitment to the company. Now, in 2025, it seems as though a new dispute has emerged over who will succeed Arthur T as CEO, with it seemingly being a conflict between Arthur T and his children versus his 3 sisters. So I hope this video will help people understand the history of the company and the Demoulas family up to this point. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to see you next time. If you'd like to have early access and give feedback on this type of content, please consider joining the Patreon. And as always, thanks so much to my patrons, Ontroid, NMS, and DC. Thank you so much for the support you have given me so far.